Live from the virtual lounge in cyberspace, it's Beats and Eats. A happy hour for the mind, featuring the best in conversation and pop culture. Food, music, movies, comedy, you name it. And you'll never know who'll be dropping by to pay us a visit. Now, here are your hosts, Ty Ray and Nick Gelso.
The virtual lounge is open. Ty Ray, Nick Gelso, and Nick, I'm going to call it a political edition. Let's not camouflage it. We're going to talk politics on this edition of Beats and Eats. And recently we released a show that went over the Electoral College map, which showed Hillary Clinton with a huge lead in the presidential race over Donald Trump. And we tried to steer away from our opinions, but this show is going to have opinions. We've got legendary Democratic strategist Bob Shrum. You've seen him on MSNBC, NBC, you see him on Meet the Press. Nick, this is an honor to have him in the virtual lounge.
Sure is. I mean, if you don't know who Bob Shrum is, you don't like politics because he's been around forever. I mean, you go back to, John Kerry, Al Gore, right? I mean, Jimmy Carter.
Well, not only that, Nick, the man, well, it's a good thing you brought up the Jimmy Carter 1980 campaign. He worked for Ted Kennedy
He wrote that speech.
Yes, he wrote my favorite political speech.
You cry when you watch it.
I cry when I watch Ted Kennedy's convention speech. Ted Kennedy lost that election and yet gave maybe the most memorable political speech of all time, in my opinion.
It was a concession speech.
I love that speech. He worked for Carter in 76, for 9 days. He worked for McGovern in 1972. He worked for Kerry in 1984. Granted, that was a losing campaign. I can't wait to talk to him about the John Kerry campaign. I almost said Bob Kerry because Bob Kerry, the senator from Nebraska back in the day. But go ahead.
I really, first of all, I love that he's from Pittsburgh, PA, but I really love the fact that he's from Pittsburgh, Ty. That's another political analyst or operative or strategist that's from Pittsburgh. Yeah, there's quite a few.
There's something about PA, and of course, the governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, who's a big wig in Democratic politics. He's on TV all the time. I love Ed Rendell. What I love about Ed Rendell is just how blunt he is about everything. I mean, he calls it like it is. And that would be an interesting...
And he calls football night.
He's a great guy. Love watching him. And for those of you listening that are saying to yourselves, okay, guys, why are you doing a show about the Democrats? Well, if you go back in our archives, my friends... We've featured Trump advisor Roger Stone couple of times on this show.
Yeah, and here Roger's getting a lot of mentions online now, or not on air now. Have you noticed as part of that whole, triumvirate with Trump, Bannon, and now Stone? Trump surrounding himself by political operatives. He's getting a lot of mentions lately, our boy Roger. I love Roger.
Well, Roger, of course, going on and on and on. What about Hillary's health and Bill's picadillos? And there's not a conspiracy theory that Roger Stone doesn't like.
Hasn't touched.
Hey, by the way, did you see Hillary last night on Jimmy Kimmel? She was great. Here's what I don't understand, and I'm going to ask Bob Shrum about this. Why doesn't she do more of this?
Yeah, it's a good question for him, but I'm sure he's tired of getting the question because everybody asks, why doesn't Hillary put herself in more candid situations? I mean, yes, we all want to see press conferences. Absolutely, we want to see press conferences, and she just runs from that. But she's great in settings where she could be herself and not be the hawk.
Well, it's so funny. Everybody's talking about, well, not everybody. I'm starting to sound like Trump when I'm saying everybody's talking, or people are saying, not quoting sources. But there are conspiracy theorists online from the right talking about how Hillary hit her head and has all sorts of health issues. I think the word dementia's even been floated around, which is ridiculous.
Tourette's.
It's just asinine. So Hillary goes on the
Parkinson's
show. Yes, Parkinson's. So Hillary goes on.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
It's all right.
Parkinson's has been mentioned alongside of Bill too.
It's nonsense, unfounded nonsense. So Hillary goes on Kimmel last night. I love it. Jimmy Kimmel's like taking her pulse, and she opens up a jar of pickles.
Yeah, I thought about that. I watched it on the replay this morning. Do you think that pickle jar was open?
I have a hard time opening pickle jars.
So do I. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Like I can't tell you how many times I got to get a butter knife and bang the side of the lid.
Well, I was doing that last night. It's funny you mentioned that. We had spaghetti last night. Michelle says, "Hey, you gonna open some sauce for me?" I'm like, "Sure, no problem." I walk in. I can't open it up.
Ty-Ray, we're a foodie podcast. Blue Apron is our sponsor, and you're making pasta sauce.
Yes, I know.
Ty, oh my God!
But Michelle's a good cook. She adds her magic touch to it. I mind you.
Well, and that's it. You could doctor just about anything up if you got the touch. But we might as well talk a bit about Blue Apron.
Let's talk about Blue Apron, Nick. It is taking America by storm, taking dinner tables by storm.
It is, isn't it? I mean, right now, I think I read somewhere 8 million meals served in 2016 already. We got 3 or 4 months left. And on top of that, Ty, this company only started 3 years ago, right? And by some young people who were serving meals out of their apartment in New York. And now it is a multi-million dollar company. And it's putting sophistication back into food. I mean, the commercials that you see on television, they are so well done. And Ty, the products that come to your house are well done. Blue Apron says their mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everybody, and they do that, man. Every Friday, Blue Apron is waiting on my front door. It's also waiting on the front door of 99% of the continental U.S. because they service 99% of the continental U.S. Blue Apron ships the exact amount of ingredients required for every recipe. They're reducing waste, Ty, and all their packaging is biodegradable and recyclable.
Well, tell us where we can get it, Nick.
Yeah, it only costs $10 a meal, and which I think is so affordable. I'm yelling at you about jarred pasta, as last night I was in a real hurry, had to stop at Burger King, got a value meal number 1, and it was $10. So I could have done my Blue Apron meal, but I had cooked all of them for the week. So it's only $10 a meal, but because you're such a loyal listener to Beats and Eats, and we appreciate you appreciating us, we're going to give you 3 free meals and free shipping. Just go to blueapron.com/beats and eats. And Ty, let's get to Bob Shrum.
Let's do it.
Beats and Eats will return after this word from our sponsor. Hey guys, we got one? When did that happen?
Hi there.
Bob, Ty-Ray, Nick Gelso from Beats and Eats. This is a privilege, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I saw you on Andrea Mitchell today, earlier this morning, and I got to tell you, thank you so much for pointing out the fact that the media wants a horse race. At least it seems that way with these Clinton emails and the Clinton Foundation. We don't hear nearly enough about Donald Trump's tax returns in comparison.
Well, I think that's true, and I think he fell behind so decisively, and he's still in a demographic cul-de-sac, that I think it's instinctive on the part of the media. I don't think there's conscious bias, but I think it's instinctive to try to make a horse race. And Andrea Mitchell's a good friend of mine. I have a lot of respect for her. But, to just put the Trump stuff out there, for example, on health, and not say there's no foundation for this, you can't just do it once. You have to do it every time you say that. Every time you do the health stuff, you have to say there's no evidence for this.
Nick and I were just talking about Hillary on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night.
That was fantastic.
And
she was great.
She was fantastic, Bob. Why doesn't she do more of this?
I don't know. She should do a lot more of that. In private, she's funny. She's accessible. She's relatable. That word I don't like, but you know what I mean. She connects with people. And I'd like to see more of that context. I don't mean just sitting around with 5 people talking about a problem, but just letting herself be herself in public. Some politicians have trouble with this. It was a struggle for Al Gore to be as real and genuine in public as he actually is and was in private.
As far as Hillary goes, I mean, she is just so compelling when she is herself. You want to watch her be herself. There's all this hubbub about the press conferences. And I understand being partial media here, we want to see Hillary in a press conference environment answering questions. But truthfully, Bob, why would she do it right now when Donald Trump is burying himself every time he speaks or tweets? Why would she give herself an opportunity to gaffe, I guess, when Donald's just doing it for her?
Well, look, there's an old political adage, don't get in the way of a train wreck.
Right.
And there's a train wreck on the other side. And so I think it's smart for her to let that unfold. Secondly, she does a press conference. There's going to be nothing but questions about emails and health. And as I said on Andrea Mitchell's show, the Monmouth poll asked a very smart question about the emails. And 64% of people said, to borrow a phrase from Bernie Sanders, they don't want to hear any more about her damn emails. It's baked in. It's already in the numbers. It's already in the attitudes. People, voters, I think, are actually hungry to hear about the economy, income inequality, how that's going to be dealt with, the cost of college, issues like health care, and obviously how we're going to handle terrorism. Those are the big issues in the minds of voters, but somehow or other they don't seem to get a lot of attention from the media.
Is it because it doesn't? You're saying voters want to hear that, and I believe that voters want to hear that. But the media has become so entertainment driven that, are they marketing to non-voter? I don't know how to ask the question. I think you're getting across what.
Look, there's a certain tabloid quality to some of the coverage. And the mainstream media is striving to catch up with cable and the new outlets, and everybody's fighting
the internet, I think,
as they put it, eyeballs, or in your case, ears. Yeah. So the Donald Trump story is fascinating to people. Now, Trump has pivoted, as far as I can see. He has pivoted. He's pivoted deeper into Breitbart darkness.
Yes.
And I don't think it's going to help him. He's got a fundamental barrier, which is that people believe he is unfit to be president. 60% plus of the American people believe that. And that's what he's got to deal with, and he's not going to deal with it by sounding like a bully boy talking about Clinton emails, saying she should go to jail, calling it a crime. That's just preaching to his base, and it's going to drive other voters away.
Is there any truth to, let me ask you this way. As the expert that you are, you're a legend, Bob. I'm not going to put it sideways here. I sound like a fanboy, but it's true. And so my question, I guess, is has Donald Trump detrimental? We know he's probably hurt the Republican Party, but has he helped the electoral process because he's brought in much more attention from just about everybody to this election? It's almost like it's a reality show in a certain way, which is scary. Has he helped in that way?
I think he's debased the electoral process. He's accelerated the trend toward a kind of unserious politics. And the problem with unserious politics is there are serious issues in the world that have to be dealt with. And the fact that about 40% or 38% of the American people would consider or say they would vote for Donald Trump is actually scary. We live in a dangerous world. We live in a world with big challenges. And another Republican candidate, Jeb Bush, I think would have been much more competitive with Hillary Clinton. And although I disagree with Jeb Bush, for example, he would have been a serious and plausible president. Donald Trump is not a serious and plausible president. Now, it'll be very interesting, assuming that Hillary Clinton wins, to see where the Republican Party goes. Do they go in the direction of another Trump, although I don't know who that would be? Do they move further to the right, believing Ted Cruz's argument that they should have nominated someone who was what he calls a true conservative, and then hidden voters, these mythological hidden voters, would have come out of the woodwork to vote for him? Or do they try to have a Clinton 1992 moment where they resculpt the party so it can again appeal to moderates, independents, the rising American electorate of millennials, Hispanics, women, and African Americans? You got Trump out there saying he's giving speeches to appeal to African Americans where he's saying insulting things about them.
Insulting them. Yeah.
And he's giving speeches in all white neighborhoods.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And all white audiences.
Right.
Could that guy? I mean, I know we need to talk the Democratic Party and Hillary, but could that guy for the GOP be a Paul Ryan, a young, he's a compelling character. I mean, I know young people really do like Paul Ryan. Could he be the guy?
He would be an interesting choice. That would be doubling down on traditional Republican economics, cutting entitlements, privatizing Social Security and Medicare. I think as people came to grips with that, he would have some real difficulties. But at least he would be a plausible president. People could look at him and say, okay, the guy's qualified to do the job, even if I disagree with him on certain things. There are other Republican alternatives. I mean, John Huntsman, the former governor of Utah, ambassador to China, who ran a not very successful campaign in 2012, I think could very well think about this again and run. Now, whether the Republican Party would ever accept him, I mean, he, for example, accepts the marriage equality. Whether the Republican Party would ever accept him is another question.
Well, I think the Republican Party, I'm no expert, but I mean, I think it would help them to get a little bit to the middle a little bit and cater to the millennials and the more. It seems like the general population are for these more moderate issues.
Oh, listen. There's my friend Steve Schmidt, who ran the McCain campaign, has often said to me that he believes that if there were a fiscally conservative, socially moderate, or liberal Republican Party in California, it would be very competitive. But after they got drubbed in the 2010 election, the Republicans thought about what they'd done wrong, the Republican State Committee, and they decided they'd been too liberal. They hadn't been conservative enough. I mean, that's a recipe for never winning an election in California, and increasingly in the country.
Yeah, Bob, what happened to this big autopsy that the Republican...
They took it as a to-do list.
Yeah, I guess so.
Do it again and do more.
Do it again. They ignored it.
It makes absolutely zero sense, but you're not going to win a Republican primary being a moderate, probably, right?
That's the problem. And it got even more complicated this cycle because the Republican establishment, leadership, has always gotten its way up until now at least for 50 years, on who the Republican candidate should be. It got increasingly difficult. It took McCain a long time to sew it up in 2008. Romney, for heaven's sake, had to go all the way to the end of the process against someone as ridiculous as Rick Santorum. And the Republican Party rode the Tea Party folks to power in the House in 2010 and the Senate in 2014. And there's a line in JFK's inaugural address, those who ride on the back of the tiger often end up inside. Well, that's what happened to the Republican Party this year.
Right.
Those folks took over, and they're not going to go away. And they're incredibly powerful, for example, in the Iowa Republican caucuses. Those caucuses are dominated by socially conservative folks who are really alienated and angry about the changes in America, the cultural changes, the demographic changes, the fact that we're becoming a majority non-white country.
Bob, is Trump trying to lose this on purpose? This is serious questions because, honestly, I've been following politics for 40 years, and I was raving about the Kennedy speech from 1980 at the convention before we got you on the air here. And I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a campaign that's run this incompetently.
Well, it's the weirdest campaign of my lifetime, that's for sure. He is certainly not trying to lose, but he doesn't know how to win, and I don't think he knows how to take advice and listen to people. So what he's done now with this guy Bannon from Breitbart is doubled down on somebody who shares his anger, his sense of conspiracy theories, his alienation, his positions on immigration, and his hatred for Hillary and Bill Clinton. So I don't think he's trying to lose. I think he's just found a way to lose.
Do you think there's any I'm sorry, Ty, do you think there's any truth to the discussion about him having the alternative plan of taking a guy like Bannon and then launching a Trump news network and something to go, against Fox? There's been a lot of talk about that.
He'd have to have the money he claims he has.
Well, claims, right.
To do that. And I don't see a lot of banks loaning him money to start that kind of enterprise. But look, Breitbart is a powerful force on the alternative right. I prefer to call it the far, far right. And Trump coming out of this, if he doesn't win, I think will be a continuing presence. He'll have probably an unfortunate impact on public dialogue in this country. But I think starting a network, I mean, everybody talks about Ailes and the role he played in creating Fox News. Well, guess what? Without Rupert Murdoch's money and investment, that couldn't have happened. So Trump has to come up with a lot of change to try to do this.
Hey, Bob, I actually heard your name mentioned by, I think it was a Trump surrogate the other day. I'm not kidding, because they were referring, they were referring to the 2004 Kerry campaign, and they, of course, threw the word pivot in there, which is the word of the week. So am I. How you guys pivoted in 2004 to close the gap. Do you see any comparison between Kerry's pivot in 2004 and Trump now?
No.
I didn't think so.
It's a ludicrous comparison, and there really wasn't a pivot. What happened was that Kerry so overwhelmingly won the first debate that he not only closed the gap with Bush, he went ahead. And on the Friday before the election, we were still ahead. And then came the Osama bin Laden tape.
That's right.
Which was very, very helpful to Bush.
That's right. I remember that. It was like it came out of nowhere. Absolutely. I don't know why they're making that pivot comparison. I have a question that I wanted to ask you if I ever got to meet you, Bob, which is the 80 convention speech. Nick and I talked about it before getting you on the air. It still brings a tear to my eye. What were your thoughts when you were writing that? You were so much younger, so incredibly idealistic. It still resonates today. I'd like to hear about it a little bit, if you wouldn't mind indulging us.
What I always say is that I helped on that speech. Kerry Parker and I worked on that speech. I did a first draft, and we worked on it. Senator Kennedy worked on it. And, for me, the frustration of the 80 campaign was that once the hostages were seized in Iran, President Carter said, I can't campaign. I have to stay in the White House and focus all the time on freeing the hostages. That ultimately actually hurt him in the general election, but it got him off the hook in the primary. So we never had a debate. We had a vigorous campaign, but the country never really got to see Kennedy as I hoped he would be seen, and I think as he hoped he would be seen. And so, that speech, it's like every speech, you work at it, but it was a labor of love for the people who were involved in it. And he had a superstition, by the way, that the prompter was going to break. Because when Orville Freeman was nominating his brother at the 60 convention, the prompter had broken. And Freeman had no text, so he just lost his way. Was underneath with the prompter operator down in the bows, and I was sitting on the steps right next to Kennedy. You couldn't see me because of the balustrade.
That's great.
And if the prompter broke, I was supposed to say, for example, page 17, middle, and then he could just flip to it because we had a book that that had the page numbers all indexed, and it was an amazing. At the end, you knew what had happened. I mean, it wasn't just Kennedy delegates, it was Carter delegates, it was everybody in that hall. And he became, although not the nominee, the voice of the Democratic Party. He also offered a way to go after Reagan, not with a sledgehammer, but with a stiletto and with humor. And anyway, it was just an amazing moment. I think of 2008 in Denver, which was his last speech to a Democratic convention and his second to last speech ever. And the big thing, he was determined in that speech, he wasn't going to use the word die because he wanted people to look forward in hope. And so the end of that speech became, the dream lives on. He was a great friend as well as someone I worked for, and he was a very generous person to me.
Bob, thanks for sharing that story. I'd never heard that, and it still brings a tear to my eye. Nick will tell you that. I hear that speech, and it just chokes me up. It really does.
He's choked up now.
I am.
Well,
it worked then. The speech worked.
It was a magical moment. I mean, there are a few speeches that have that kind of impact. I can think of in the Kennedys, JFK's inaugural address, Bobby Kennedy's speech the night Martin Luther King was shot, Ronald Reagan's speech when the Challenger was destroyed. Those are very powerful moments. Most speeches are skywriting. They're said and they just disappear, even if they're very good. But some live on and acquire a certain. They become standards by which people compare other speeches.
Where do you think Obama's from this year's DNC rates? I mean, I thought it was just a beautiful speech. Perfect.
I did too. I thought, listen, he is capable among modern orators. I mean,
amazing.
Modern politicians. He is capable of giving spectacular speeches, and he has. I think he's given too few of them. The criticism of him in 2008 was that he was all speech and no substance. He became president, and he was a lot of substance, and in my view, too little speech. And it was a huge mistake for Democrats in 2010 to not have him out there making the case in the midterms, trying to minimize the losses. Same thing in 2014. One of the things Hillary Clinton, if she's president, has to do, unless she wants a 2-year presidency and 6 years of frustration following that, where she has to rely on executive orders to do anything, we have to adopt as Democrats not necessarily a 50-state strategy, but an every election strategy. And that becomes particularly important in 2018 because you're also going to be electing state legislators and governors, and those folks will be in charge of reapportionment in 2020. Right now, the House is grotesquely gerrymandered, and the first chance to undo that is going to come in 2020. So you got to really, you got to finish this election, assuming if she wins it, and I think she will. But then I think you got to govern the country, and at the same time, really invest in the 2018 midterms, when the Democrats have 25 Senate seats up, and the Republicans only have 8.
Yeah, well, I know we're going to let you go. You're a busy man, but sticking on Obama for one more question. In your expert opinion, I have this argument often especially with Republicans, obviously, Obama's presidency. I happen to believe in decades to come, it's going to be remembered as such a turning point, such a great, successful presidency. Where do you believe Obama, or how do you believe he'll be remembered in history?
I think he'll be remembered as a great president. There are certain skills that you wish he had more of. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of interest, for example, in getting to know or schmoozing members of Congress, and that's something a president needs to do. But it's very hard not to look at this record. Health care, financial reform, what he's managed to do on immigration, preventing us from falling into a Great Depression, which we almost did, and and the Iran deal. And not to say this is a presidency of truly extraordinary achievement. Now, one footnote, it's very important for him that Hillary Clinton win this election. Because if Donald Trump does, the first thing he will do is try to undo everything Obama did.
Yep. Marriage rights. I mean, there's so many. So the list goes on and on.
What he's done on gay rights and what the Supreme Court finally did with the marriage decision, that's all historic, and it will be remembered and written about in history books. He's got a significantly higher approval rating. He's over 50% than Harry Truman did when Truman left office. But I think there will be something of the Truman effect after he's gone. Truman at the time nobody thought of as a great president. Today we do. And I think that's going to happen with Obama.
I agree.
Bob, thanks so much for your time. This has been an incredible privilege, very exciting for me as well.
Enjoy it.
Yeah,
hopefully you'll join us again at some point.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back. Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Take care.
Bob, thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ty, I think I'm going to say it this time.
Yeah.
I'm going to just come right out and say that was effing cool.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
The man's a legend. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, whether you're from the right or you're from the left. Bob Shrum is a legend. He calls it like it is. He's worked on so many different campaigns, presidential campaigns, Senate campaigns, gubernatorial campaigns. And the man speaks from his heart, Nick.
And he made you cry.
Yeah, he did. Because the story of the convention speech from 1980 is an incredible story, one I had never heard before. We're talking about the Ted Kennedy concession speech at the 1980 Democratic Convention. And I dare any Republican who's listening to this show to go back and listen to that Ted Kennedy speech in 1980, and you tell me if that's not a great speech. You may not agree with some of the content in it, but it was powerful stuff. Listen, I'm no fan of Ronald Reagan, as you know, Nick. But I certainly admired the man and his ability to convey a message, and he was a great speaker. I can be that objective, and I would hope Republicans could do the same thing when going back and rating the great speeches of all time. And Kennedy's, to me, is tops.
I don't want to drag this show on because it was too good in what it was, but I will say this. I usually try to be, I mean, Ty, there's no question about it. You're a liberal Democrat, and I usually try to toe the line on this show a bit. I mean, I think the listeners know I'm also a Democrat, but I don't normally gush the way I did. On the flip side of that, I gush all over Roger Stone too, but you're talking about a different caliber of political expert here.
We're talking
without putting Roger down.
I'm not putting Roger down. He's a political operative,
and he's interesting and amazing and intriguing because he brings up some really crazy, wacky points that may or may not be true. But today, what you heard today on Beats and Eats is a legend, and it will go down in our. We've had many great guests in all walks of life, right, Ty? Many famous people, but this one's right there with it. And if anybody has questions, Ty, I mean, why don't we throw out our Twitter handle?
Absolutely, I'm at Coog88.
I'm at CLNS_Nick, and it's still pretty tricky, Ty.
It's at Beat the letter N Eats, and Nick, we can't top this. So with that,
no, the lounge, it's closed.
The virtual lounge is now closed. For Beats and Eats, I'm your bartender. Until next week, stay cool.